1 year ago, Canada watched its own Prime Minister resign. Trudeau stepped down. What followed was a political reset. Trudeau out, Carney in. Today, Quebec is watching its own premier resign and asking the same question. Are we watching a Trudeau-Carney 2.0 à la mode Québec? Welcome to the first episode of 2026. This is Distinct, Quebec politics with an accent. Your weekly check-in to see what's really going on and what's cooking in Quebec politics. And what a way to start the most consequential political year in a generation. Quebec Premier François Legault has announced his resignation, effective as soon as his party chooses a replacement. For many Quebecers, this came as a shock. François Legault becomes the first Quebec Premier in 25 years to resign while still in office. The last time this happened, it was actually in January, but of 2001, when Lucien Bouchard surprised everybody and resigned. For most political observers, this was not a surprise. François Legault has been trailing in the polls for the better part of the last 2 years. His party unable to reconnect with Quebecers, even in recent polls, failing to crack the top 3. By resigning now, François Legault closes the door on 28 years in political life, the last 7 as Premier of Quebec. There will be plenty of time to fully assess François Legault's record once the dust settles. But for now, one thing is already clear. François Legault has been a formidable force in Quebec politics. Leaving an established party, founding a new party, convincing people to join this new political gamble. 7 years later, taking power with that vehicle, and then having 2 straight huge majority government. It's a huge success, and just for that, Mr. Legault, full respect. So why resign now? Less than 9 months before the next general election, François Legault is at the bottom of the polls, and he has been there consistently. Not only that the party numbers are weak, but François Legault's personal approval ratings have hit historic lows, lower than most Canadian leaders we've seen in recent decades. Even Justin Trudeau, a year before his own resignation, was more popular than François Legault. Now that's quite something. The writing was on the wall. Quebecers were not listening anymore. They want change. What's striking is that nothing worked. Even the Quebec Liberal leadership chaos didn't materialize into any bounce for the CAQ. Last fall, François Legault made one final political push, a full court press. More secularism, new immigration rules, reforming labor laws, a Quebec constitution, and most importantly, reforming doctors' pay to improve access to healthcare services. That last measure was central to and precipitated the downfall. On paper, it was a smart political move, pitting more healthcare services to the population versus powerful medical and doctors' unions. That was the play in theory. In reality, it turned out a public relations disaster. Doctors threatening to quit, elderly Quebecers already anxious, feared losing their doctors. So what started with a smart, bold political move became a self-inflicted injury. Legault ended 2025 with a final push, a series of end-of-year interviews. He was forceful, confident, insisting he would run again in 2026. He even began to carve out his strategic message. The pitch was simple. The Parti Québécois offers nationalism without talking enough about the economy. Conversely, the Liberal Party of Quebec talks a lot about the economy, but not enough about identity and nationalism. And here comes François Legault and the CAQ, which is the only party, according to him, and that was the pitch, that both talk about nationalism and the economy, right down the middle where Quebecers are. It's a strong framework, but here's the problem. Nobody was listening. The numbers did not improve, they got worse. So at that point, only one decision remains: resign. So what happens next? The CAQ, the Coalition Avenir Québec, will launch formally a leadership race, process to be determined. Once that leader is selected, François Legault will formally resign. That new leader will become Premier of Quebec until the next general election in October 2026. A year ago, something similar happened at the federal level. Facing sustained bad polls and a major resignation in cabinet, Justin Trudeau had no choice but to resign. That transition worked surprisingly well for the federal Liberals. They regrouped. And today, Mark Carney is Prime Minister. So the question is obvious. Could the CAQ, the Coalition Avenir Québec, pull off the same comeback? In my opinion, the short answer is no. And here's why. The Liberal Party of Canada is an institution, one of the oldest political institutions of the country. It has history, it has roots, and has resilience. That was part of how they came back from the dead in the 2010s. Now, the CAQ is completely the opposite. The Coalition Avenir Québec is a young party, barely 15 years old. On top of that, the party is largely built around one person, François Legault, its founder. When Legault founded the party in 2011, he had one premise. Quebecers are tired of the national questions and they want practical solutions to their problems. So Legault brought together sovereignist and federalist, and later on merged with the right-leaning party. Put the constitution question aside. That was a strong political offer, an offer that led him to two majority government. But today, the context has changed. The CAQ's success rested on two pillars. First, as we said, Legault himself, and two, the coalition that he built. Now both are disappearing. Legault obviously resigned, but on the coalition front, sovereignists are returning back to the Parti Québécois with its promise to hold a referendum. Federalists, in response, part of that coalition, are going back or will go back en masse to the Liberal Party of Quebec to counter the sovereignists. So what's left in that coalition of the CAQ? It's the right-leaning conservative. But guess what? The conservative wing of the CAQ has now a conservative party to itself, the new Conservative Party of Quebec, that is rising in the last years. So no sovereignists, no federalists, no conservative inside the coalition. What's left? 11% in the poll. And that explains the resignation. In other words, unlike the federal Liberals, the CAQ is a fragile party that was born out of a specific political context. And unlike Ottawa, there is no Mark Carney waiting in the wings. No outsider, no exceptional resume, no broad public appeal. Most likely, the next leader of the CAQ, of the Coalition Avenir Québec, will come from the current cabinet. But as of now, no one stands out. There's no unifying figure. there's no Paul Martin or there's no Mark Carney. Whoever wins will inherit 8 years of governing baggage with the same unpopularity that comes with it. So the big picture, what does it mean for Quebec politics moving forward? In a span of weeks, we will see a complete reshuffle. 2 major parties with 2 new leaders, a new premier, a reset political landscape. Quebecers will be presented with new choices. New leaders, at least briefly, will have an opportunity to shape public opinion. For the past 2 years, the Parti Québécois has been comfortably in the lead. But remember, Pierre Poilievre looked unbeatable too, and still couldn't close the deal. The ground is shifting in Quebec. 9 months before the most consequential election in a generation, nothing is set in stone. Everything is still up for grabs. And that's the story we'll be following week after week. Thank you for stopping by for your weekly Quebec political fix. This is Distinct Quebec Politics with an Accent. I'm Farouk Karim. À la semaine prochaine.